Okay. Judges ready. Timer ready. Imagine this. In space on national television, the world watches an at-ease flight crew headed to the moon. Then all of a sudden, the spacecraft explodes. Mission Control is yelling. The spacecraft is unsuccessfully trying to regain control. What went wrong? When the diagnostic test came back, it only showed them their worst fears. The spacecraft is dying. This is the story of Apollo 13. To understand Apollo 13, one must understand the terminology of this speech. The command module refers to the section of the spacecraft devoted to the storage of oxygen, water, and food. The lunar module refers to the section of the spacecraft only designed to land on the moon and is extremely tiny. The reentry vehicle refers to the cone-shaped part of the spacecraft that holds the astronauts and is designed to enter the Earth's atmosphere. In the interest of time, I'll refer to the command module as the CM, the lunar module as the LM, and the reentry vehicle as the RV. When Apollo 13 took off, the world turned its eye and was no longer interested in space travel. In fact, Mission Control complained of boredom. However, up in space, Apollo 13 became a ticking time bomb. When that bomb went off, they began to lose oxygen. Now, losing oxygen is a major problem because these following symptoms occur: loss of communication, loss of navigation, loss of life support, air heater malfunction, and finally, a very slow and dreadful death. Dying was the least of their worries. Without oxygen, a billion-dollar spacecraft becomes the same as a big tin can. Horrified, Mission Control raced to stop the loss of oxygen, but it was soon realized the command module was beyond repair. The only way to not kill the astronauts is to move all systems to the lunar module. The lunar module was not designed to carry three people, but in fact was designed to barely carry 2 people for a very limited amount of time. Instead, Houston was able to double that to 90 hours for 3 people. Carbon dioxide is the next killer. The lunar module could not handle the extra carbon dioxide pollution caused by the extra man, but the command module filters could. So they had a problem on their hands. The command module filters were square. The lunar module filters were round. So the only answer was duct tape. They took the astronauts' oxygen hose on their spacesuit and used duct tape to fit a square into a round hole. Now, they had to focus their task on getting home. So, what would they do? After much bickering, they decided a slingshot maneuver would bring them home faster. A slingshot maneuver is when you use the acceleration caused by the moon's gravity pull to then slingshot them around and shoot them towards Earth. Now, this is much faster than turning around because at a mere 17,500 miles an hour, you don't just turn around and make a U-turn. No. It takes a lot of fuel. In fact, more fuel than what they even had on the spacecraft at that time. So, with the slingshot, they gained speed and took them just around 4 days to get home. Now, they had to focus on reentry. The funny thing about our atmosphere is that if you come in too shallow or too deep, you'll either be obliterated or will bounce off the atmosphere into space again. So, for a proper reentry, one must first come in at an angle, turn upside down, pull out of the atmosphere, then go back in again. And then you're fine. You're not dead, and you're alive, which is pretty good by my stance. So, now they had to get ready for reentry. Mission Control had them separate the CM from the lunar module and the RV. The astronauts were horrified to see a whole quarter of the CM missing. This new problem that occurred was that the quarter of the CM missing was next to the reentry vehicle. If their reentry vehicle was harmed, they would die instantaneously on reentry. But there's no going back now. There's nothing else they could do. So they began. On the way into the atmosphere, there's this phenomenon called the blackout. Since it's hitting the atoms in the air at such a high rate, it creates friction, which makes heat. This brings the spacecraft to a couple thousand degrees Fahrenheit, cutting out all radio communications. Now, Houston predicted that the blackout would be around 3 minutes, with the total reentry 6 minutes long. It took the Apollo 13 astronauts 7 minutes 30 seconds to enter the atmosphere and land. This led many to believe that they had been killed, but they were very much alive. Now that they had landed and they started the investigation to figure out what went wrong, they realized that a faulty wire right next to an oxygen tank sparked, causing the explosion. And that was extremely bad because it blew off a quarter of the command module. I mean, in space, if that quarter would have penetrated just a little bit more, they would have immediately died in the vacuum of space. So that faulty wire made the entire Apollo missions redesign their electronics. Now, Apollo 13 had horrible conditions in this capsule. The frozen food was basically all of it. They could barely eat anything. It was 38 degrees Fahrenheit in the cabin. There was condensation all over the walls. So when they were re-entering the atmosphere, it melted, causing rain, which is pretty funny, saying it's a couple thousand degrees Fahrenheit outside and it's raining. So it's pretty interesting. So Apollo 13 was nicknamed the successful failure because they did not complete their mission, but they got all their men back home. Apollo 13 was a disaster, a success, and the most infamous spaceflight in the history of the universe. Thank you.